Hi, Duran. I wanted to leave you some feedback on your thesis statement and outline. Um, so you're writing about Williams's essay. I think that this is a really good choice for the essay. And I think that I kind of like the ideas that what you're doing is you're trying to connect it to the real world, right? And particularly to 21st century America with what you're talking about here. I think that that's a good connection to make to the text. However, I would caution you to bring it up this soon. I think that this is something that would be really useful in your conclusion. But what you want to work on first is summarizing Williams's story, capturing his main point, and then presenting your thesis, and then making a plan for how you plan to support that thesis. That's what I don't see yet in this assignment, and that's what I'm really looking for you got for you, or excuse me, that's what I'm looking from you for this assignment. So I don't yet see a clear stance presented on this story in the form of a thesis statement. So it sounds like what you want to argue or what you want to explore is the use of force justified? And if you want to explore that, you want to put it within the context of the story. So a good question that you could potentially use to help you with the thesis statement is ask yourself, in this story, is the use of force justified? And then you could attempt to answer that question and have the first part of it be your claim, and then it's up to you to figure out the reason. So, right, it might look something like, here, let me download your paper really quick so I can make some edits. There we go. So, if you asked yourself, is the use of force justified in the story, essentially, you could, let's say that you just say that it is, you could say, the doctor's use of force is justified because, oops, and then you need to determine why that is, right? So note that this essentially becomes your claim. The doctor's use of force is justified. That's what you're trying to convince the audience to do, think, or believe because, and then you present the reason why. Of course, we could also flip this around and say the doctor's use of force is not justified and then argue why. So I think I would start here, trying to figure out what it is that you want to argue, because I don't yet see a thesis statement in this draft. So the next thing that I want you to pay attention to is making sure that you're being really clear and focused with your summary. So you say in Williams' essay, it speaks on the use of force and if it's justified. Make sure that you present the full signal phrase there. So you need to introduce the author's title and the author's full name. So in William Carlos Williams, The Use of Force, what you don't want to say it speaks, because an essay does not speak. However, a writer can argue, right? Or a writer can suggest, or a writer can explore. So trying something like in William Carlos Williams's The Use of Force, the author discusses the use of force and asks the reader to think about if it is justified. Does that make sense? So you have the right idea, but you need to slow down your pace and make sure that you're saying everything that you need to. Then with all of these ideas, you're moving too quickly, right? Meaning that you're not bringing in enough summary detail for the reader to understand what happens in the story. So you're moving too quickly. From where the doctor stood and how he persuaded the family into making it feel right, the reader doesn't have enough context and background information to understand what you're talking about. Same thing here. He continued to mention how she's going to die from the disease and he needs to get this done. We don't have enough context there. So slow down your pace, right? The story is set in a family's home. The family has called a doctor to come to their home to give a diagnosis, right? Does that make sense? Those are all the details that you're missing. So you need to capture that plot summary for the audience so they have enough information to understand what the use of force is, and then begin to ask that question with you if it's justified. like I said before, I like this connection that you're making to the real world, but what I don't see are clear ideas, clear key points that you could use to support a thesis statement. And I think the reason for that is you don't have a thesis statement yet. So I don't really see an outline yet. However, I think that there is enough time for you to develop that outline. So I think this is where you really need to start with this question. So attempt to answer that question and provide the reason, and then work backwards, right? Capture the summary, present the thesis, and then think about what are the key moments in the text, right? Because really you're going to argue this based on what occurs in the text. What are the key moments in the text that you can use that will help you argue this thesis, argue this stance for the audience? Okay, I think it can get done. I think you can get there, right? So I can see that you're asking the right questions, but the reader's just not certain where you stand and why, and that's the thing that you need to make clear to the audience. All right, let me know if you have any questions. I'd be happy to talk to you about this further.